Well, thanks for having us. It's great to talk about Volition. I think it's a company that quite a few of you might have heard. It's been on the MicroCapClub for a while. So instead of going through a more regular corporate presentation, we're going to focus on the 4 points that we have here. Quick intro about who we are, the vet opportunity, and obviously the vet operation, which is the first product on the market currently. And then the NETosis opportunity, which probably the company is not as well known for, and it's an emerging area for us, and nonetheless very exciting. And then further down the line, what's next for Volition. So very quickly, who we are. Volition is a diagnostic company focusing on epigenetic markers. Epigenetic is really what sits on top of the genome, if you will. So semantically, it's really on top or in addition of. One of the analogy would be the reader, but it's a reader that has a lot of function into deciding what gets expressed and what will not be expressed in terms of the information stored on the DNA. Interestingly, the big genetic companies haven't focused too much on this space until recently. So this, and there are plenty of reason for that, from Darwin to Mendel and later Crick and Watson on the helix. Most research have been focused on the DNA parts and leaving room for quite a lot of research that Volition has conducted. This allowed us to build a large IP portfolio, 90 patents granted so far, and another 100 pending. We're adding patents to the tune of a couple every month, or at least we're filing. But patents don't mean much if we're not starting to monetize them, and that's what really has changed since the inception. Really, is we are now starting to, and it's really just a starting of monetization of this IP. Tom joined in May 2021. I joined in January, and effectively, if you take the midpoint, a year later, we signed with Heska the first major agreement. For 20 million of upfront and milestones, so we received already 10, but we'll talk more about that, and then ongoing revenue. So that goes to show you we're starting to monetize, and there's real demand, and for actually significant amount of money. It's our belief that it's if not the biggest, one of the biggest deal for a biomarker in the vet space, but it's hard to confirm because not everything is public. We are really focusing our energy now on commercialization on two areas for 2022 to 24. Really, what Tom will talk about, which is the vet cancer space, and then additional extension to that. But that's on the vet side. And then on the human side, we'll talk about NETosis. So before I let Tom talk about the vet opportunity or the vet product line and what we're doing on the vet side, just want to show quickly what nucleosomes look like as a representation, and effectively this is part of a technology is here to capture to see the different modification that you can see on those nucleosomes. So now, Tom, I'll leave you talk about what we're doing on the vet side.
Thanks, Gael. Welcome everybody. Enjoy the opportunity and to present to the ladies and gentlemen that are on the call. Just wanted to, you obviously know I'm a veterinarian. Joined the company back in May of 2021. I've been in the veterinary industry for 40 years. I've been in academia, I have been in private practice, and I also have been involved in corporate ownership. This platform is one of the most exciting platforms that I've had the opportunity to be exposed to in my veterinary professional career. The ability to potentially revolutionize how we treat cancer in dogs, and hopefully we're going to be working on cats in the coming year, is a potentially phenomenal achievement. To be able to detect early, before clinical symptoms are there, is a major achievement, and it's just an unbelievably exciting time. The ability to revolutionize not only how we detect cancer early, but also it's going to revolutionize how we treat cancer in dogs and in other species, because of our ability to detect cancer in a non-immunocompromised dog when they're perfectly healthy and they seem to be asymptomatic, not showing any clinical symptoms. I'm sure all of you have a friend or a family member who's been involved with a dog in some fashion that has been lost to cancer. To give you a little bit of a context about it, 77 million to 84 million dogs in the US alone. Greater than 6 million of them are diagnosed with cancer annually. 50% of dogs greater than 10 years old die of cancer. Up to now, my veterinary colleagues have not had a screening tool that can aid them in diagnosing or at least detecting cancer prior to clinical symptoms. We usually see the dog when they're sick, when the lymph nodes are enlarged, when the client is complaining he's not feeling well. In this particular case, with early detection, we are able to detect that there is something going wrong on the cancer side prior to them showing clinical symptoms, which is a major achievement. And to be able to do it in an easy, affordable, and reliable way with our Nu.Q platform is something that we're unbelievably excited about. So to tell you a little bit about the Nu.Q Vet Cancer Test, it's positioned for use in the annual wellness exam. So these are when the dogs are healthy. They're coming in for their annual wellness exam. And typically, as I mentioned earlier, we see this in dogs that are 7 years of age and older, more senior animals, where 50% of them over the age of 10 die from cancer. But also there are about 25 predisposed breeds, of which you know a lot of them, golden retrievers, Rottweilers, Labradors. Unfortunately, I've had the unfortunate opportunity to put many of those dogs to sleep at 3 and 4 years of age. So we're also recommending that this test be utilized as a wellness visit in those normal dogs that come in at 3 or 4 years of age that are predisposed breeds to see if potentially they are circulating some nucleosomes in their bloodstream that potentially are detecting cancer early. As I said, it's an ELISA test, it's low cost, it's easy to use, and it really is going to help streamline the diagnostic process. A multi-cancer paper that was just produced by Dr. Heather Wilson-Robles, because we're well papered, this is our 4th paper, which just came out about a month or so ago. That was in a study of 662 dogs at 97% specificity. What that means is a 3% chance of false positives, which is a very small percentage. No test is 100%, but at 97% specificity, this is a really good test. The Nu.Q Vet Cancer Test identified in this series, we presented this at the Veterinary Internal Medicine Conference in 2022. We also presented it at the ESFON conference in Italy with the European conference, and it detects 76% of systemic cancers, predominantly hemangiosarcoma at 82%, lymphoma at 77%, and histiocytic sarcoma at 54%, plus 50% of all the other cancers. To give you a little context here, lymphoma and hemangiosarcoma and histiocytic sarcoma make up close to 35% of the cancers veterinarians see on an annual basis. And close to 65 to 70% of the cancers they treat are lymphoma and hemangiosarcoma, because these are bloodborne cancers. Our test is a liquid biopsy test, a bloodborne test, and consequently, this is why we really started going after these cancers initially, and we are also finding success at 50% with other cancers as well. Again, accessible test, affordable test, highly reliable, and rapid. Rapid in terms of, I'll talk about a POC in a couple of minutes, and also in terms of the turnaround time on an ELISA test can be the next day. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's coming in the future with reference to our Nu.Q platform. We have vet monitoring, and I'll tell you a little bit about vet monitoring. What that means is when the dog has cancer and comes in for treatment, we currently have to go through scans, imaging, and blood work in order to determine whether, in fact, that dog is responding to treatment, which is costly. With our monitoring test, which we are working on, there's a paper that's going to be coming out soon, we can identify early on during the course of treatment by taking this affordable test where that animal is in terms of responding to treatment, and also identify when it is going into remission. The other part about the monitoring is when that dog goes back to the owner, we can also take this test potentially on a monthly basis and identify if in fact those cells are dying again and that cancer is coming back. That is a major, potentially a major achievement for us, because right now the cost of doing ultrasounds and scanning and imaging is very costly. Having a marker like our test, being able to identify how the progression of disease is going, and also being able to identify when it goes in, when that dog goes into remission, and when it's coming back at a very affordable price is quite remarkable. This preliminary data was presented at the Veterinary Cancer Society. Interestingly enough, Dr. Heather Robles, who's our chief medical officer, is the president of the Veterinary Cancer Society. That was presented on October 21st. We also went to Sicily at the European Veterinary Oncology Conference, where there was close to 300 veterinary oncologists there, and presented paper and data again about this monitoring. And as it says there, paper is to be submitted for peer review very soon. We anticipate that paper hopefully will come out with a peer review publication, hopefully in the first to second quarter of 2023. I just mentioned a little bit about monitoring a dog's response to treatment and coming out to remission. These are major milestone achievements that we're collecting the data for now, and we anticipate bringing to the public and to our veterinary colleagues in the very near future. Next slide. As I mentioned, the key here, detect with our test, detect early with our test, treat early, and then monitor them when they're in remission. We do not have those tools right now, except very expensive tools when that dog is sick and when that dog is symptomatic. We are doing this when that dog is asymptomatic. So the chances of treating cancer, both in humans and animals, in people that are feeling well and are not immunocompromised, just like in dogs that are feeling well, the success, the rate, the ability to have successful treatment is significantly increased. Detect, treat, monitor. Next slide, please, Gael. Also in the near future, as Gael mentioned briefly, he'll talk a little bit more, we have a point-of-care test coming out in development with the Heska Corporation and the deal that we signed with them. The results will be available in minutes. So this test will be a machine that will be a small machine that will be located in the veterinarian's hospital, where they can actually take the blood, put it in a cartridge, and get the answer within minutes. You can see how on an annual wellness test where you bring your dog in, the veterinarian could express that answer to the client right away. It also is something that could potentially help a lot with monitoring and treatment, where you're trying to monitor the success of your treatment during the course of that, and having a point-of-care instrument in your hospital and getting that information right away is obviously extremely valuable. Next slide. Longer-term products in development. We are currently working on cancer in cats, which is a very important segment for our feline owners and our feline lovers. So that is over the next 6 to 12 months, we are working on that. Netosis, which really means nets, which is neutrophils extracellular traps. What that is these are white blood cells. When you are sick, there are white blood cells which are released into the bloodstream, and they contain our nucleosomes. So when those nucleosomes are circulating, when you have cellular death and neutrophils released into your bloodstream, you potentially can monitor that through netosis and through identifying our nucleosomes, and you can pick up sepsis, early infectious disease, potentially trauma, where someone's in a car accident or something like that. A lot of things can happen to the organs, and other critical diseases. This is a remarkable finding that's going on the human side, and we also bring it over to the veterinary side and working on that. That's a current project that we're on, to bring that into emergency and critical care situations and also high-end hospitals. Our nucleosome platform can also potentially be used in production animals. Cattle, for example, for respiratory disease, mastitis, metritis. Those are things that happen frequently in cattle. And to be able to identify that early before a herd becomes infected is something that could be significantly helpful in a multi-billion-dollar industry. And then finally, in horses, our tests we're currently running through pre-analytics over the course of the next 6 to 12 months as well in horses, with reference to diseases that affect horses as well as performance, and trying to identify if a horse is healthy, whether they're healthy to jump or they're healthy to run. These are tests that we're looking at where our platform, again, can be used. The robustness of our platform is quite remarkable. Yes, Gael, next slide.
Thanks, back to me.
At this point in time, I'm going to turn it back over to Gael for the commercial aspects and the market opportunities that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So obviously, we picked this this first product for a reason. We think it's a big market and it's a sizable unmet need. Tom mentioned some numbers, but I just want to reiterate, we have probably close to 80 million dogs and 6 million diagnosed with cancer every year. There are probably 20 million dogs alone in the US within the target market. Our potential partners and existing partners have conducted extensive market research, and they always come back with there is a strong need and it's a big market. Worth mentioning as well, in terms of competition, today the only alternative is next generation sequencing, which is very significantly more expensive. In a cash market where there is no reimbursement or very little in terms of insurance, and even that, the insurance premium would be significantly higher. Our test is positioned much, much cheaper. We're working, obviously, we don't have control of the retail price, but to a price point retail that is around $50. So compare that to next generation sequencing, which is in the hundreds, easily 500, sometimes less, but usually more. We have a strong advantage there. The overall strategy commercially is to build the R&D, build the IP, build the technology, and then work with partners, in the case of that, with Texas A&M, to build the use cases, the clinical use case. And then we are not here to build our own, a large sales force. We are effectively distributing via agreements with global players. So you heard about SK, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But you have other big players like IDEX, Entex, Zoetis, and so on. And on top of those large players, we're working with regional ones, especially in Europe, but also in Asia, to kind of have a full coverage of key regions in the world. So the first large agreement that we made was with the Heska Corporation. It's a point-of-care veterinary company. So they're really focused on point of care. Point of care, we think, is probably around 10 to 15% of the market as far as Heska. So it's a small portion of the market, but a very interesting one. It's a fast-growing one, but we'll go into coverage. That's why we're working with and working on signing other larger partners, because then we'll get more coverage. The agreement was for 10 million upfront, and plus 18 million upon the launch of the next product. Tom mentioned monitoring. We have obviously screening, and we have additional animals. So we expect to get most of this 28 millions. We received already 10, so over the course of 2023, we received most of that. What's really interesting with SK is their entrepreneurial spirit and their eagerness to move fast. And I think you'll stay tuned on this, because you might see more with SK as we are getting to know them and appreciate their way of working. So next step on the vet side, increased coverage. As I mentioned, SK is only a small portion of the market. So we're going to sign large players as well as regional one. I just want to mention one thing, just on the 28 million. For Heska to make money out of this deal, if you do the math with the penetration that they have, as well as the operating margin that, and they're a public listed company, they need to literally sell millions of tests a year to make it worth it after the ramp-up period. So we think, and they are putting where the money where their mouth is, that it's a very significant market. And obviously, once we increase coverage, we're also working on expanding the product line, and that's what Tom mentioned. So now going to nets. Tom started talking about neutrophil and nets, and this, now we're moving to human, but as you heard, it's also something we're working on the animal side. This is just a quick picture to show you, effectively, it's a first line of defense. It was really starting to be investigated around 2000, 2004. We're actually working with one of the, if you will, discover, it's not really that term, but someone that was one of the first papers published on a subject. It's a really interesting area. It's very growing. It's a growing area of research. And naturally, we have a marker that can help, target those nets. Because nets are effectively a form of cell death that release chromatin. And what we're saying is our marker is effectively very effective at targeting those epigenetic marks that are associated with chromatin, that are the nucleosomes. So we have a natural evolution for Volition to work on this. It's a huge market potential. You're talking about sepsis, coagulation, transplantation. we internally have to narrow down, more limited use cases that we are focusing on initially. And so that's why I mentioned sepsis, coagulation, transplantation. Those are the three that we flagged as being the initial ones that we're going to. And just to show you a couple numbers about the market opportunity, 1.7 million adults every year are diagnosed with sepsis, 250,000 die just in the US alone. It represents a large part of the death at hospitalization. Thrombosis, it's 1 million cases per year. And you have to realize, because our test is not just a diagnostic, and because we're not technically diagnostic, we're helped to diagnose. But really here, we're going to deploy it as risk stratification, treatment and monitoring, and remission monitoring. It is a test that you're going to see used multiple times per patient, and potentially, not potentially, also with non-patient, people that are coming to critical care. We need to test them to make sure, what their level is, because potentially a sepsis is forming, and they want to monitor that. Those are very sizable market for us. So how are we going to commercialize this? So you're going to see over the next few quarters, and it's already started, onboarding key centers of excellence. Those, because we got the CE mark in Europe, those are centers that are taking on a machine, dedicated machine, and start to run the test as a pilot for them, and deciding to onboard it down the line as commercial. So we started already. I don't know exactly how we're going to communicate about that, but we're starting to deploy that in Europe, and that should lead to sales already starting in 2023. We're going to work, and this is a public information, on FDA trial. Sepsis, you should hear more in late Q4, early Q1, for a breakthrough device designation application, and then for broader NETosis use case later in 2023. We announced also a clinical study in collaboration with MD Anderson. This one is interesting. It's the cross of cancer and sepsis, because most people die in hospitals because of cancer and the weakening that cancer does to their body. But sepsis is a big killer in cancer patients. So it's an interesting collaboration that we have going, which is kind of crossing between oncology and NETosis. And then obviously we're working with major actors on the coagulation market and other markets there. I just want to mention quickly, this is a different timeline to commercialization than the vet side. We already started discussions, and the learning that we brought from the vet now is starting to percolate on the animal side. So this is an area where it's moving faster than we expect. With that said, I want to be careful. Bringing new biomarker to market takes time. So finally, going forward, what are we working on, and what can you expect from Volition? So obviously, you're going to hear on the vet and net side. We haven't stopped working on oncology. We're moving to a next generation oncology because the market has changed. So you'll hear probably next year about Capture and other programs that we have on the oncology side. We keep working on decreasing the barrier of adoption. Our goal is to be hardware agnostic. So effectively, we are deploying our technology on multiple platforms, so hospitals don't have to, buy expensive machines. So that lowers the barrier of adoption. We're working on price as well to make sure, this is not a barrier as well. We are working on the number of publication use cases. As you see, there's a large number of use cases on the NETosis side. We need publication to refine that and make sure clinicians really can onboard for very specific use cases. We're working on regulatory approval. You'll hear more about that, FDA, of course, but also IVDR. We are IVDD in Europe, and that's why you see us onboarding centers of excellence. But that has a more limited application. We're working on IVDR going forward. And then you'll hear us also mentioning additional licensing and distribution agreements on the vet side, and hopefully, next year on the human side. So I think that's it, Sonor. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for the presentation. What are the general economics on the vet test to Volition? Meaning, Heska sells it for $50 retail. What do you expect to get that Volition makes off that?
Tom, do you want me?
Go ahead, Gael.
So let's say $50 is the vet price. So what the vets charge, it's a standard distribution agreement where the vet probably, and that depends on the country, but let's use the US. It's probably you bring it to less than half of that for Heska. And then again, you probably halve or a little less than. So, you might divide by between 2 and 3 to see what we get. We have a target of a blended between POC and a reference lab with a price around, between $8 and $11.
Okay. And I think it was in your investor day you did up in New York, you talked about, hopefully early next year, you'll have pretty wide distribution in the US, which obviously assumes that you're going to be signing up some more deals between now and then to get that distribution in the US and also in Europe. How is the European market, kind of different than the US on the vet side?
Tom, do you want to?
I can give some color on that, Ian. Just out of interest, over the summer, I spent 6 out of 9 weeks between June and July in Europe, meeting with the major oncologists in Germany, France, and Italy, and attending the Sicily conference. The KOLs, a little bit of the difference there, the oncologists in Europe really drive the GP adoption, the general practitioner adoption, which is a little bit different than the North American market because the GPs rely quite substantially on the oncologists to direct them where to go with it. And the oncologists that we've been meeting both at shows and individually going to some of their major hospitals and some of the academic institutions in Europe are extremely excited about what this test could bring to the table for them. So they're very excited, obviously, a lot about the monitoring piece of it, because they've seen the sick animals, but also too, they're going to be working with us in additional collaborations and doing additional POC testing there to utilize it. And that will obviously reflect into the GPs, who the 3 questions they constantly ask are, what about the test? Where do we get it? And how much does it cost? And we answer those 3 things for them all the time. And consequently, we are establishing reference labs and relationships in Europe to address those 3 questions. In the US, because there's only about 400 oncologists, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of veterinarians. Of the veterinarians that treat on an annual basis, veterinarians probably treat 76% of the cancers, and the oncologists treat about 16% of them. They just don't have enough and to do that. So consequently, the GPs have a much stronger understanding of the test because they will use it because it reflects into what they're doing, both from a screening perspective as well as monitoring. And the oncologists really supplement them in terms of education. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic between the 2. But we're making great strides in Europe and great interest in Europe, and we're looking to the European market to be a really strong market for us.
I would just add, it's a more fragmented market. The US, once you get 2 of the large one, you probably get 90-95% coverage. In Europe, you will need some regional players.
Mm-hmm. And maybe a follow-up question to that for either one of you. Obviously, you're probably talking to some central labs, the bigger ones like IDEX or Mars or those types here in the US. I'm curious, how do you get the attention of companies like that? What did you have to prove to them, or what type of due diligence do they do to kind of back up the claims you're making about a product like this? Because it sounds too good to be true. I'm just curious about, just qualitatively, what it's like dealing with companies of that size.
I'll give you the veterinary side of it. I've been in the industry for 40 years. And consequently, I have a tremendous network that I know everybody in the network with reference to the large companies. So it's relatively easy for me to make contact with them because they know what I've done, they know what I've been involved with, and consequently, there's been a trust factor and a relationship that's been built up over an extended period of time. So that network, which I've been able to establish, has obviously been able to propel us to a lot of high-level discussions with a lot of these companies. The other thing that they have been doing on the vetting side, this is the first time that a affordable cancer screening tool has been brought to a veterinarian's capabilities. And consequently, they have no reference point to it. So it has taken a lot of education from our standpoint to get them to understand where this could fit into their wellness plans, where this could fit into their programs, because they have no reference point for it. So all of those discussions take time to develop, and they are very progressive. And we're dealing with leadership at all those companies. So it's not that we're dealing with the low end. We're dealing with leadership. So they're really getting a feel and an understanding of where this test can be used and the financial benefit it can be for them and their doctors to utilize it in their own particular corporate groups. That's my perspective of it. Gael, if you want to add anything else.
I'll just add what Tom did mention is as a founder of a large chain of clinics that was IDEX was an investor, and the CEO of IDEX was on the board. Build a relationship, obviously, and get some knowledge there, and then move to Mars, where had their leadership role in Mars. So again, contact there. We were in discussing with a company that was working with Heska already separately. So all of those, you realize we had already something that we could build on. I would say just on the due diligence, it takes a good amount of time to transfer the technology and to conduct some of the tests that they have to do at large scale. So you have to imagine. They are, I won't name them, but they're planning a rollout on a large number of labs. So now, how do you industrialize effectively or tests? And depending on the partner, Heska was willing to sign with 99 or 95% of the work done. Other wants 110% of their work done, effectively ready to launch when you sign. So that's what's happening in the background. Transfer technology, getting them to understand the use case. I think we got there on pretty much all of them. It just takes a while. That's why I say launching a new biomarker on the market takes time. There's no shortcut for that.
And when you think about rollout strategy next year through either Heska or central labs, like is that staggered? Start slow and expand it out, or is it kind of launched all at once? Or is those decisions that are yet to be made?
We're not in a driver's seat here, so obviously we try to work with them on making sure. But let's put it this way: there is a healthy competition in the market, so there is a little bit of who is going to launch first that you're going to see. So our expectation is it's probably going to launch by more than one player at the same time, around the same time. And the time is usually the time of a big conference. So you have a couple coming in Q1. That's usually where they like to announce. If not, then there's another set later in the year. So that's kind of where you can expect big announcements from them to launch, because that's usually where they like to do it.
And another realistic point to that, Ian, just the realistic part of it, where some of these big players take up a huge portion of North America in terms of their distribution, and they all have a lot of veterinarians that they service. So if one big player signs, those veterinarians are going to go to that player. Well, the other player is going to want their veterinarians to use their labs. So it's a domino effect, which is really what Gael is speaking to. So,
okay.
So the company has, I think, shifted their focus more to the vet side than the human side, at least for the near term. Can you talk a bit about where the human side is and where you plan to go with that?
Yeah, so that's when I talk about NETosis, it was mostly in relation to the human side. So this is where we have a CE mark product in Europe. We are working on the FDA, so you'll hear more about that in the next few months on the FDA, applying for breakthrough device designation. It won't accelerate a lot the process, but it gives us the full attention of the regulator. In Europe, because we have already an IVDD regulation or marking, we are able to onboard key centers of excellence. So KOLs, large hospital networks that are willing to be the first to try in a real setting, with the goal to move them to routine over X months. So that's we're focusing on the human side on NETosis currently as a product rollout. We have Europe that is effectively in pre-launch mode, if you will, in pilot launch mode. And on the side of onboarding those centers of excellence, we're already started discussing with large players in the coagulation, thrombosis, and so on, and more than that. But effectively, the major players that you know of we're already starting discussing. I will tell you from my perspective, it's progressing faster than it did on the vet side because there are already on Ethosys 5,000 to 6,000 publications out there on PubMed. So for them, it's not a novel discussion to talk about NET. They understand the impact of NET. What they didn't have is a test to measure it. We didn't talk at all about that, but the alternative they have is homebrew, MPO DNA, cell-free DNA. So those are the kind of non-standardized, more research kind of tests. What is very exciting is everyone understands the interest of measuring NET. What they didn't have is a marker. So for us, it's a lot faster on this side. No, faster to get their attention. Doesn't mean faster regulatory-wise, but we're already in discussion, which is probably where we were 6 to 8 months ago on the vet side. So it's really interesting what's happening on that side.